Now let's talk about how we manipulate behavior. So I talked in the other videos that we do that by adding or taking away either a reward or some type of punishment or unpleasant stimulus. So we add or remove a pleasant stimulus, or we add or remove an unpleasant stimulus, and we manipulate behavior that way. So I also talked about controlling the environment, the antecedent, the A, and the A plus B equals C formula. So manipulate the environment so that the dog has to succeed or has the highest possibility, highest probability of success for a behavior that you want to be performed, and then you provide a consequence based on whether that behavior is performed or not. So we can do this a couple ways. We can shape the behavior, that is the sort of learning process. And there are two common ways, two common methods used to shape behavior, that being free shaping and luring. And free shaping is sort of catching the dog doing the right thing. It's a very classical conditioning approach where you sort of just wait for the dog to do the thing you want. You might put some loose or general constraints on the dog's behavior, but essentially you're waiting for it to make its own decision. Now there is some speculation that this is a stronger learning process for the dog. However, it's not typically as fast of a learning process. So I do think both free shaping and luring have place. They're both relevant in training your dog. What I like most about free shaping is its application in the behavior management stage. So like when you catch your dog laying down, being chill, if that's something you want, then you mark and reward it. Again, catching them doing the right thing, doing what you want. Same with if you want them to pay attention to you when they're walking around in the backyard or whatever, and you're working on that relationship building stage. So moving on to luring a behavior then is exactly what it sounds like. I might hold a piece of food and raise it up over a dog's nose, between their eyes, back towards their ears, and the dog's rear might drop to the ground and sink. So I lured that dog into that behavior, or I might lure the dog to my side to like move into the start of a heel position. Okay, so again, that is very helpful when you're teaching a behavior, and that's a good place to jump into food versus toy rewards, and I use both. I like both a lot. I find that food is very helpful when I'm teaching a behavior because I am able to lure with it. I am able to provide a lot of control, again in that like swooping motion for teaching a heel, like I mentioned. That is a lot different than like presenting a tug and having the dog sort of lunge at it and trying to move around like that. That said, I love toys once the behavior is learned. I love toys once I'm in that reinforcement stage of behavior because it excites my dog, because it builds my dog's drive, and that's how I get enthusiasm in the behavior. I might talk more on that later. As far as the speed at which a behavior is executed, I think has less to do with the dog noting the speed, like recognizing if it does something faster, it gets a reward versus slower. I think it has a lot more to do with like the dog's state of mind when it's trained and when it's performing. So those are some methods for delivering rewards, luring and free shaping. Let's talk about punishments then, or rather punishments and corrections. So when you talk about applying a unpleasant stimulus to your dog, you are usually trying to stop a behavior. I'm not endorsing any sort of dank and crank or avoidance measures. I don't advocate for those either, but there will be times when you have to correct your dog. So the difference then is that a punishment is punitive. It's you having an issue with your ego and your inability to control your dog, and you exaggerate that response and push up against that abusive boundary of, well, abusing your dog. Obviously not all punishment is abusive, but the point is it's punitive. it serves to just hurt the dog or make the dog feel inferior to you. Correction, on the other hand, may be a punishment, or it will use a punishment to redirect the dog to a correct behavior. Say that again. A correction leads to a correct behavior. So, when I punish a dog, I'm not just like whooping him, right? I'm not just cranking on the leash or whatever and shouting at the dog when he's probably overstimulated anyway. What I want to do is reward the dog when it does do the right thing. So yes, I may have to stop the behavior. I used the example in an earlier video about a dog chasing after a cat, and you correct the dog with the leash, but you redirect the dog towards you or away from the cat. Mark and reward that correct behavior. The correct behavior being, leave it, you left it alone, I mark and reward. Or watch me, you watch me, and I mark and reward. With all that in mind, I want to emphasize again that corrections do have their place. They have their place for safety, and they have their place once a dog has already learned a behavior. So, using reinforcement to teach a dog a behavior, those are your shaping methods, luring and free shaping. And then once the dog has learned a behavior, then you can correct when the dog does not follow through. It is not fair to your dog to correct or punish him when he has not learned a behavior. In other words, you're just confusing the animal. It doesn't understand why it's being shocked on its e-collar, or its neck is being jerked on a flat collar, or why you're shouting, or any of that sort of stuff. This leads me to the problem with positive only training. And some people will probably give me flack about this, but I don't care. Positive training is great. Positive only training is great, but it is limited. You can teach a dog to do just about anything using reinforcement. However, there will be times where you must use force to stop your dog for its safety. Let me give you an example. So let's use that cat chasing metaphor again. So you're walking down the street with your dog. You've used your positive only methods to get the dog to follow you, to walk with you, and you're having a nice little off-leash walk down the street. Then all of a sudden, a cat darts out from under a car, and your dog chases after it. Immediately, you notice that that cat is headed into traffic, and your dog is in pursuit. There is nothing you can offer that will take that dog out of drive and bring it back to you. There is not a treat, a hot dog, a ball, a tug that will bring that dog back once it has given chase. So, let's think about how you could have prevented that. Again, you don't need to be punitive with your measures either. You just need to control your dog's behavior. Having a leash and a collar allows you to correct the dog, alright? You're essentially providing an unpleasant stimulus, physical force, to stop the dog's behavior for its own safety. Let's give another example. Say your dog is always getting into the trash, into the kitchen, and by the time you turn around, it pulls its head out of the trash can and runs into the other room. Well, if it's finding really good, stinky, rotten stuff in the trash can that dogs tend to like to eat, the dry kibble that you've got to fish out of your pocket a couple minutes later or 30 seconds later is not going to do the trick to convince the dog that what you have to offer is more enticing than the jackpot it's already found in the trash can. So you need to correct that dog's behavior. Ideally, you need to stop it before the behavior is executed. So when you foresee your dog going over to the trash can or sniffing the trash can, that is the time you need to correct the dog and give it an opportunity to succeed. So when you first see the dog going in the trash can, you say no, and give your command, leave it. And when the dog leaves it, then you reward. Or if it disobeys and does not leave it and goes to the trash can, you've got to stop that behavior. You can't allow the dog to self-satisfy on whatever it is you want them to leave alone, be it the trash can or chasing a stray cat. So that'll do it for this video. Again, thanks for your support on Patreon, and keep watching Illegitimate Canine.